We're going to move on to looking at some work that Mark and Vanessa have been doing around Action for Happiness. Mark is the director of Action for Happiness, and they already have almost 30,000 members across 140 countries, all pledging to trying to create a happier world. Isn't that fantastic? And Vanessa has a master's degree in applied positive psychology. She produced the 10 Keys to Happier Living and is an expert in putting these into practice, even in the US Army. I can't wait to hear more. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me okay? Yep. Lovely to be here. Can I start by saying a massive thank you to Henry for putting on this event and for Happy for hosting us all here today. I think it's wonderful and so inspiring and great to connect with you all. My name's Mark Williamson. My colleague Vanessa King I'll hand over to in a moment. Really happy to be here. I'm going to talk about this, what I've called the happiness factor here, but obviously in this room we have a lot of people passionate about this topic of creating a happier workplace. What we're going to hope to do is kind of give a little bit of evidence that helps support that. If many of us are going to make the case about why this matters, how can we do that in a way that actually gets people's attention, that actually kind of shows us some substance to this stuff? I think we've heard some fantastic case studies and practical examples, but there's also some kind of evidence from research and other things that actually is really quite engaging and interesting, and we're going to share a little bit of that in hopefully a fun way and also get you involved too. But before doing that, just very briefly about Action for Happiness. As that intro sort of hinted at, we're building a movement of people who really care about happiness, care about it in the context of what our politicians should care about, what we should do in our schools, what we should do in our workplaces, what we should do in our communities. We're privileged to have this huge community of members and indeed to be backed by lots of experts from psychology, business, a range of other fields. And really we're all about trying to find the evidence on what really makes for a happy, fulfilling life and make it accessible, fun, engaging. So hopefully some of that will illustrate in today's talk. But I wanted to start with kind of what is happiness? What does it mean to be happy at a human level? And I very much like this definition from Matthew Ricard, which says happiness is a deep sense of flourishing, not a mere pleasurable feeling or a fleeting emotion, but an optimal state of being. And I think that's kind of what we're talking about here. How do we help human beings, ourselves and others, be kind of at their best, to feel good, to function well? This is not some flippant, short-lived sense of I'm happy because I've had some nice cake, although in many cases that's a very good starting point. But it's actually, it's deeper and richer than that as well. But kind of what I wanted to go to next is, what are some of the benefits of this? Not just for organisations, but for us as individuals. Because I think if we're going to win people around, we need to know the personal benefits and the organisational benefits of getting this right. So I'm going to start with a little story, and a couple of you may have heard it before, in which case apologies, but it's about nuns. And bear with me, that may not seem particularly relevant. But in about the 1930s, a group of nuns, hundreds of nuns, were entering their life in convents. And they were asked by the Mother Superior or whoever to write a little bit, a sort of page, about them as a person and their expectations they were going to start life as a nun. And so they wrote down things, and obviously very personal and particular to them. And in the sort of 90s, a couple of decades ago, scientists were studying groups of nuns towards the end of their lives and happened to come across this data from 60, 70 years before, and we're able to do something you can very rarely do in research, which is correlate someone's emotional state of mind at an early age, about 20 on average, and look at whether that has any effect on their longevity and health later in their lives. And so they did this analysis. They looked at which nuns had been happy at age 20 and had been sort of pessimistic or unhappy at age 20, and then looked at their future lives. And it leads me to my favourite graph of all time, which is this one. Which is staggeringly that at age 85, only about a third of the nuns that had been least happy at age 20 were still alive, as opposed to 90% of the happiest nuns. So the message from this, and indeed from many other studies, is that actually if we are happier, if we have higher psychological well-being, that's actually great for our health and indeed our longevity. And in this very vivid example, and of course nuns have very similar lives and lifestyles and diet, there's all the other factors about life's complexities are not relevant or so relevant here. And really that's an example of lots and lots of evidence about the health benefits of being happier, of having higher psychological well-being. We're also able to form better relationships, we have a happier life at home, we're even more likely to kind of help others, to volunteer. So at a personal level, this stuff really matters, and we should be making that point to each other and to colleagues that, as individuals, happiness matters. But what about organisations? I'd like you to each think about these three viewpoints from the perspective of your organisations and your working life. How many of you have come across this? As soon as I see any of my team smiling or having fun, I know they're not working hard enough. Has anyone ever worked in an organisation where that's a kind of an ethos you've seen? Yeah, okay, quite a few of us. And what about this? This is a serious business and we need to focus on getting the job done, but it's nice if the team can feel good. Have you worked in organisations where that kind of culture is the predominant culture? Okay. And finally, what about this? If I can do something to bring a smile to people's faces, I know they'll actually get more done. Who's had the privilege of working somewhere where that kind of is an attitude? Okay, a decent proportion. I mean, that's very rare, actually. The majority of organisations are probably somewhere in that middle sense. But what's interesting from the research is that it very clearly points to this. And another one of my favourite experiments in this area was some researchers that basically took groups and gave them productivity tests to see how productive they would be in a workplace. And for one group, they left untreated, as a scientist would say. The other group, they primed them to feel positive. And what I love about the experiment is the way in which they primed them to feel positive. They showed them, quite literally, a 5 or 10 minute comedy clip. And they gave them productivity tests. And what they found was, compared to the non-treated group, the people who'd seen that clip and become happy as a result were consistently about 12% more productive when controlling for gender, for IQ, for work experience. So really, these quite serious economists doing this research said happiness has powerful causal effects on labour productivity. How happy you are affects how productive you are. Although not everybody finds Blue Belly funny. The people who were treated and didn't find it made them happier. There was no increase in productivity. So the message, folks, is unfortunately not to pipe comedy into all of our offices, much as that might be attractive. It's really that whatever we can do to create that boost of positivity can have a much more profound impact than I think many of us or many of our colleagues or organisations would ever acknowledge. And that translates into other data, and this may have already been mentioned today, but analysis of, for example, the 100 best workplaces, in this case in the US, from a kind of stock market perspective, when compared against a stock market benchmark. In this case, these great places to work where employees feel happy, feel motivated, feel valued, massively outperformed the benchmark index over a kind of 10-year period. I mean, that is not a trivial finding. And of course, you can't show the causality here. It might be that happier people choose to work for better organisations, but clearly there's something going on there that's quite important. So kind of to summarise this first bit, there's a big advantage for us as individuals to feel happier, but as organisations, it's perhaps even more profound, more productivity, healthier employees, higher engagement, greater flexibility, even responding better to critical feedback. So lots of that's already been covered today. But one of the questions is, why is that? Why is it that feeling that greater positive emotion could have such a big impact? So I'm going to hand over to Vanessa, who's going to bring some of her expertise on this as well.
Is that working? Yep. Is that working? Can you hear me? Great. My voice may go. So why is it? It's all very good, and we've all spent a lot of this morning having lots of bursts of happiness and feeling good and positive emotions. But actually, it's easier said than done, because biologically we're programmed to actually focus on the negative. It's ingrained. It's because we are constantly scanning our environment. I started out, my original degree was psychology and zoology, so I grew up with evolution, if you like we all do, in fact. We're scanning our environments for risks and danger because that has enabled us, in the short term, to survive. So there's an adage that some psychologists use that the bad is stronger than the good. From an emotional perspective, that's absolutely true. We tend to feel negative emotions much more intensively than we do negative ones. They have a strong physiological effect. And for those of you who don't know, emotions are a mixture of feelings and set off a chain reaction of physiological changes that create specific action tendencies, as it's called, so tendencies to act, behaviours. And for a long time, it was believed that actually negative emotions were the only ones that really mattered by biologists, psychologists, etc., medics, etc. And Darwin was very strong about that because of this short-term survival effect. So if you see a lion or whatever in the wild when we were cave people, mammoths or whatever those are, coming towards us, what you absolutely need to do is feel a strong surge of fear and decide whether you're going to stand there and fight or flee. And the And that's good. And what they do, what they've noticed is that what negative emotions do is in the short term, they narrow our perceptual fields. So, if you're walking down the road and you see a lion coming towards you, or in a modern day context, a bus or somebody in a fast BMW hurtling towards you, what you don't want to be standing there smelling the roses. You want to be damn well focused on that source of danger. So you know where it's coming from and you know how you can respond. So that's great. So what negative emotions do is they narrow our perceptual fields and they shut out the sort of periphery stuff. So we're focused on that source of danger. But some quite groundbreaking research in the last decade or so has actually shifted the psychologists' and biologists' minds about positive emotions. And they're not just airy-fairy, nice to have, but they actually change what we see and they change our behavior as a consequence. So what happens when we're in a positive emotional state is we literally see more, we take in more. We are more open to other people. We're more trusting of other people. We're more creative. We come up with more creative solutions. And what this does over time is because we're taking in more, we're learning more, we're experimenting more. Over time, what that does is build our psychological resources, builds our capabilities, builds our skills. This is known as the broaden and build theory of positive emotions. And what positive emotions also do is they can have a buffering or an undo effect of when we're feeling negative. I think that's not for any reason we have this expression gallows humour, that we we laugh when we're in really difficult, when the proverbial hits the fan. So in a way, whilst negative emotions have been responsible for our short-term survival, positive emotions have actually been responsible for development of individuals, developments of cultures, development of societies, for our long-term survival as a species or as societies, and you could argue even organisations. And what those do is, I like this sort of slide, creates an upward spiral. Barbara Fredrickson, the researcher whose research this is, talks about creating upward spirals of development and positivity for people. But emotions, of course, go up and down, because this isn't all about saying, right, we've got to be happy, clappy all the time. It's all about positive thinking, being positive and all this stuff. There's no place for negative emotions, because in reality, emotions go up and down in the course of the day. This is work that was done by, I think he was the only psychologist that's won the Nobel Prize for Economics, Danny Kahneman. And the emotions go, he was looking at the times of the day when we feel good and when we're not feeling good. And we love this research, because what they say is they find that of these studies, and they gave people bleepers, and they bleeped them on the hour, and then every hour they asked people to record how they were feeling and why. So people are, peaks are, the happiest peaks are sort of, just after you've woken up, maybe having breakfast here at lunchtime, and then later on in the evening. This is on one group of Texan women, apparently the happiest time was when they were having sex. But interestingly, from a workplace point of view, on average, people's least happy time of the day was time spent with their boss. Now, if you're a leader of an organisation or a manager in an organisation, that is quite important. And I think and there's a lot of focus on leadership in organisations, from a consulting background, but actually I think it's the managers that make a difference to people's day-to-day experience. Most people experience of work is influenced by their direct line managers. That old adage you've all heard, which people join organisations and leave managers. So this is kind of profoundly important. So what would we say is, how much is enough? What's the right balance on average if we want sort of good performance and high performance in our organisations? What's the right balance of positive to negative emotions, would you say? Put your hands up. Would it be an equal balance, 1-to-1? What about 3-to-1? No? You over there? 6-to-1? 12-to-1? Ah, Slough cuckoo land. No, you can have too much enough, because actually this may be shifting the reality on average. The research says that the minimum you need for good performance is an average of 3 to 1. The highest performing teams, and a lot of the research was done on sales teams, was an average of 6 to 1. And this includes the, appreciation, that sort of happiness, the high fives that we were trained in this morning, and having spent time in America, I've appreciated that. I know it took me a year to learn, being very English. But it's also things like building on each other's ideas. So what's the balance between pushing my ideas on you and supporting my ideas and dissing your ideas, versus inquiring and asking why, why you were thinking and what your ideas are. So it's this, building advocacy and inquiry. So there's lots of different ways, and I think the positivity has lots of different ways sort of feeling good manifests itself. So in the sort of the really cheery stuff, but also in the calmness and in the interest and curiosity for other people and other things. And the good news about all of this, and what the research is showing, is that actually, whilst a lot of our happiness levels are indeed is set beyond our control to some extent, so that's to do with our genes, the environment we are in, and the environment we were brought up in. But there is a significant proportion of how we feel is actually down to how we think and what we do. So behaviours that are within our control, things that we can learn. And Matthew Ricard, who Mark quoted earlier, has this great phrase which I love. He's supposed to be the happiest man on the planet. I love him because he was a scientist and now he's a Buddhist monk. So he's not flippy floppy. But he says happiness is a skill that can be learned. And indeed our experience, and we've been experimenting with teaching managers some of these skills, that indeed this is having an effect. So, our brains basically can change. With practice, with deliberate practice, habitual practice, our brains can change. We can create new neural pathways. So I'm going to ask you, if you will, you're obviously up for experimenting, to do a couple of experiments and just changing how we can change, even in a moment, maybe make a change to our emotional state. So, what about breathing space? And this is particularly useful sometimes, maybe not here, but when you're having a stress time at work, or you're stuck for ideas, or etc. So this is a simple skill, and this is taught with school kids. It's taught with members of parliament and a whole range of people. So if you can, just sit with I would suggest sitting with your feet on the ground, just because that's just grounded. This is just a simple technique. It's called the 7-Eleven, not a convenience store. Are they around anymore, 7-Elevens? I don't know. Are they around? Yeah. And all it is you breathe in for the count of 7, your own count of 7, and breathe out for 11. So you basically match your counting to your breath. So if you goes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and then you can go, and likewise with 11. So why don't we just do that? Just in our own heads, counting at our own pace, because we'll all have our own paces and rhythms. So here you go, just in. Okay. How do you feel differently now? A little bit different to how you did a few seconds ago? I just think you can feel there's definitely a calmer energy. And this is a form of positive emotions. This is a good state sometimes we can be in, because we can actually it's interesting for me that even if you're not into meditation, you haven't studied, one of the mindfulness programs that are out there, some very good ones out there, but actually you can use these techniques just to make a meaningful state, change in your level of emotions. And I've done it sometimes when I've been really wound up or anxious about something. Just go in the loo and do it. Do it. I was doing some work with some managers recently, and he said, "I've got this technique." He said, "I'm doing the Zen breathing thing you taught me." So I do it when I'm making boiling a kettle at work. He said, because nobody can see that I'm doing it there. He said, but he said, I'm doing it, and it actually really makes a difference. Because normally I go and make a cuppa when I'm a bit stressed or I've had a really bad email. And he said it's really helping me to just take time out and think about, just to kind of think, about what I'm, going to do next. That's quite good. And I'm quite interested that Nigel was talking about innovation. And actually, most of us know that our best ideas come in the spaces. Our best ideas don't happen when we're really trying hard at something. You need the hard work, with it, but actually then you need to be able to create breaks for yourself, to create, for your subconscious. I'm a great believer in the subconscious doing some work. So, and of course, mindfulness, and I know Google is at the forefront of some of this work, is that we know that the practice of mindfulness is one of those skills that can make huge changes. The regular practice, and it is about practice, this stuff doesn't come particularly easy, but it's certainly been shown to reduce stress and anxiety, increase our resilience, increase our cognitive functioning, improve our relationships, boost our immunity, increase our empathy with other people. And there's even some research to show that actually mindfulness practice actually helps us want what we want. We have more rather than kind of trying to seek out having more, which is one of the roots to unhappiness. Another one, and Alex talked about this a bit earlier on, introducing this concept, just thinking about 3 good things. And this is another tool which is directly from the research that actually we're finding is being used quite widely by some of the managers we've worked with. I mean, including kind of field engineers that have been in the business for 30 years, kind of big beer belly guys who are deeply cynical about anything happy clappy. But they've now coming in and saying one of the guys said, I'm now starting my meetings with what I call the bright spots. Why don't we start bright spots? And we start the meeting with those. Alex talked to us about how that was beneficial. We know that makes the meetings work. He said, and my team are they're a bit cynical at first, but now they're even emailing with these things between meetings. That these are the good things. So why don't you just turn to someone next to you, if you can, somebody you haven't worked with. Otherwise, you might need to, after lunch, sit next to someone else because you're running out of people to work with. Just think of, share 3 things that have happened to you in the last 24 hours, 48 hours, work things, home things, that you've been pleased about or enjoyed. Maybe you can share a little bit about why those are important. Just very quickly, couple of the good things that you heard people say really quickly. Over here, someone here.
I had a really good commute to work this morning and very easy on the train. That's always makes me feel
Super, here.
It was our office manager's birthday yesterday and somebody brought in a massive cake, which I loved it.
Super duper. Good in some ways, bad in others, but yes, hey. Something over here, good thing. Watch your seed go. Perfect. Lovely. So, and what's interesting is, you could see from the energy when you did the mindfulness stuff, you were still feeling good, but it was a very calm, quiet state. This was a much more animated, engaged state. So just in the space of a couple of minutes, you've been able to shift your emotional, some of you will have experienced a shift in emotional balance, which is great because it gives us a sense of control. And these are some of the things that we do have control over, and we know control is good for us feeling good. And there's Alex talked about the evidence for that, which we won't need to go into. But that's just a couple of little examples. And here's a whole host of things that you can do from the evidence. Do you want to, Mark?
Yeah, I mean, we're sort of running out of time, but just I think you've all got cards on the 10 keys to happy living on your chair, so I won't go into these in detail because we haven't got the time now. But our kind of looking at all the latest research of what really makes for a happy life, building on work done by Nep and many others in this area, kind of has highlighted areas that it's not a 10 commandments, but there are things that in general tend to really boost positive emotion and happiness. So we just wanted to finish with one final thing, which is, really, you've heard lots of things today, a few things that Vanessa's just done with you now, lovely ideas through the whole of the morning. One of the themes that keeps coming up is little things make a big difference. So the final thing we'd just like you to do to the person next to you, ideally someone you've not spoken to before, have a chat about what are some of the things you can take away that are the smallest things that can make the biggest difference, and we'll end on that. So what little things could make a really big difference for happiness in your workplace? So maybe just share that with someone you've not spoken to before. Okay, thank you. Can we interrupt your lovely conversations, please, folks? Thank you very much. So sorry to interrupt you. There's such a lot of energy in the room with that. I would love just to hear 2 or 3 of those lovely ideas that just came up there. Little things that you could do to make a happier workplace based on anything you've heard today. Can I hear some ideas that you've just been discussing? Random acts of kindness, doing things to help others. Lovely. Putting 10 keys to happy living on people's desks. We'd happily provide you with 3 copies of that card if you would like to do that. Thank you. Wonderful. Thank you very much. Thank you so much. We've got to go now. Thank you.